give the floor in this order. Mr. Agnew first, and then Mr. Sikierski.
Chairman, thank you. I don't envy the auditors with the job of defining grassland. An auditor could turn up to a farm one day after some very heavy rain, be shown some permanent pasture, and say, well, actually, this is a lake. I mean, I've seen my own ground like that, and the auditor would say, I'm sorry, this is what I see, a sheet of water, this is not permanent pasture, you have claimed fraudulently. He may then go to another country in Europe, a very hot country in the summer, where he's shown a completely black, burned-out mountainside because the grass dried up and somebody lit a fire, and he would say, this is not permanent pasture. So you've got problems there. Then we've got something that's particularly British, parkland. Now, if you've got a 20-acre field and there's a tree in it, there's no doubt it's a 20-acre field. However, as the number of trees increases, when does it start to become woodland? But there is agricultural value to these trees. They give shade to cattle and sheep, which is very important, and also for free-ranging hens. They can go out, they're encouraged out to do this. The welfare people like it. Not only that, these trees provide acorns and beech mast and all sorts of things for the poultry to eat. So they are actually agriculturally quite useful. But when does it become a wood? And when is a farmer tapped on the shoulder and said, actually, you've got a wood here, Mr. Agnew, not pasture, and therefore we're going to fine you goodness knows how many thousands of pounds. You mentioned encroachment. This isn't helped by the fact that the EU have managed to ban the sprays, the pesticides, herbicides we used to use to stop the bracken and the docks encroaching on pasture. Have actually made that more difficult. And finally, active farmer. What really is your definition when it comes to landlord and tenant? And will the auditor want to see the accounts of the individual concerned to satisfy himself you have actually invested money in this field, you've taken a risk, or you haven't? Because that is becoming a very sore point now, that these payments are rolling up to landowners who are taking no risks whatsoever. Thank you.
Bon, je vais juste retenir deux ou trois.
Let me just deal with 2 or 3 questions. Objectives. Mr. Agnew, Mr. Lyon, Mrs. McGuinness in part raised those questions. It's not the court that fixes the objectives for the common agricultural policy. What we criticise is that when there aren't objectives, if you read the general regulation on direct aid, I'd be really grateful if you can tell me where it says what the objectives of the common agricultural policy are in that regulation. Well, I can tell you myself, nowhere. But that's not the Court of Auditors' fault. It's the document that the Commission put to you and that you then amended and that you're now going to talk to the Council about. So to take the specific example of permanent grassland that's been mentioned, it's not for us to define what is permanent grassland. All we're saying is that firstly, if you talk about maintaining areas of permanent grassland, that means maintain at the same level. But what level? We don't know as of today. How many thousands of hectares are there in the European Union which are permanent grassland, which are supposed to be maintained at the end of this period, i.e. 2020? I don't know myself, and you don't know, and neither does the Commission. That's the first problem we've got. There's an inconsistency in the objective. Secondly, what do we call permanent grassland? Well, as a Court of Auditors, as a member of the Court of Auditors, I have no power to say that. What I can say is that what is in this idea of permanent grassland has got wider and wider in the course of the debate, and nowadays practically a wood is permanent grassland because it offers shade to the goats, which I think is taking the idea of permanent grassland a bit far. But once again, I'm not in charge of defining permanent grassland.